Hey there, wonderful YouTube jewelry makers. In a previous video, I had done a demonstration on fitting the bezel to a half round wire. And again, you can use any profile you want. This little scrap of metal here just happened to be half round. And so I fitted the bezel to fit on a half round wire. You can use any profile you want. You can turn that into a square profile. The premise behind this, of course, is to fit it on a little scrap piece of the wire that you're going to be turning into a ring, rather than fitting it onto the ring band. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make the basic ring band that will become a spinner for a wider base band. Sounds like a 1990s rock group. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do is measure your base ring and get an average, because they don't always end up being very round. So we've got 21, 2080, 2085, 2090, 21. So let's call it 2080. So then you take also the thickness, and I think this is like around a millimeter. 2080 plus 1.13. Let's call it 1.1. So 20.80 plus 1.1 equals, then we're going to give it a little bit of wiggle room, so let's call it okay, I'll figure that out later. So times 3.14 for pi equals 6876, and I'm going to bump it up to 69. And that way, if it is a little bit too tight, I don't want to have it too loose, and I don't want it too tight, but if it's too tight, I can stretch it up on the ring sizer. I can't make it smaller without removing material. So let's go with 69 millimeters. Okay, normally I use boric acid and some alcohol, which I then burn off, and it leaves a nice powdery coating of boric acid. But my batch of boric acid is a bit weird, and it leaves a really nasty black, whatever it is, sludge, I guess, on there. And actually makes it hard to see the solder joints. So I'm just going to spray some cuprinol on my metal. First of all, I'm going to just give it a heating up using my little blazer torch. And some of you might be asking, if you have a dual gas torch, how come you don't use it? I'm making my videos for people that may not have a dual gas torch, but pretty much everybody has access to a little butane or a little Syndico torch, campfire torch there. So I'm trying to keep it as user-friendly as possible. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's just heat that up. And 2 parts of vinegar and 1 part of peroxide, hydrogen peroxide, makes an awesome pickle for gold-filled if you want to get rid of the copper bloom that comes up to the surface when you heat the metal. So I'm going to call that good. Let's quench this, and then we'll do a preliminary little wrap around the ring band. So you can see it's much more bendy. So that is actually not too bad. There's a little bit of an overlap there, and that's okay. So now I'm going to round up this little spinner band. Oh yeah, there we go. It's just not quite in line there. All right. So using a Delrin mallet, so that's a nice bit of tension on there. So now you can get a pretty good idea of how that's going to fit and how it's going to spin. So there is absolutely no spin to this whatsoever. So I'm going to just spread them open a little bit. And again, pretty tight, which actually might not be bad for a single spinner to keep it in one spot if you don't want, especially with a bezel mount on here. If you don't want the bezel spinning around and getting in your way, then I would say just keep it fairly snug. But I think I'm going to take a little bit of material off of there. And that is probably not too bad. Yeah, I'm going to call that good. So I'm happy with where that seam is. So I'm going to now solder that together. Straighten my wires out. And then we're going to create a solid seam here. Again, you don't need to be too concerned about it being, super fancy and super clean. As long as it's soldered together and it's a decent soldered joint with the hard solder, because you don't want it being flimsy at all that it's going to pop open. So this is, like, you can see here that it's not perfect, right? There's a big visible kind of a gap there. And if I was doing this on a ring, I would not, where it's like at the bottom of the ring, obviously I would take a lot more time to make sure that it's finished nicely and is well fitted. But we're going to be cutting this out anyways, so don't waste your time on trying to make it perfect, because it's not going to be there when you're all done. All right, let's get busy with soldering this. Okay, here's a close-up of the seam before it's been soldered. You can see that it's not very well fitted. There's some big compression marks in there from the scissors, but again, not a big deal. All right, so I am going to spray this now with some yellow flux, and I'm going to use some Argentium hard solder. Okay, I've got my little tiny pallion of Argentium hard solder here, and let's give everything a little spritz with the yellow flux, including the solder. And we're going to be pick soldering. Okay, so you can see I've got my little solder ball on there. And I did not get very much flux on the other side, so let's just give that another little spray. placed my solder. I'm just going to switch my torch over to my other hand so that you can see. And I'm going to get rid of this third hand so that I can rotate my table a bit. Zoom in there. Okay, that's a good one. And sometimes these little torches, these blazer torches, take way too long for my liking, so that's when I switch over to the big guy, the Syndico. So you can see that, you know, obviously you don't want to have that when you're presenting a ring for sale, but because that's going to be removed anyways, it is nothing to be worried about. So I'm just going to quickly round this up on my ring mandrel, and then we'll see how it fits on the ring band. It looks pretty good. Yeah, just the right amount of spin on there. Be a little bit tighter. But maybe I'll put it into my ring reducer and see if I can reduce the size of it. Well, that's the first time I used the Pepe ring reducer. Normally I size up bands, but that actually worked out pretty good. It really could use a little bit of a stretching up in size now. So let me just go quickly do that. All right, well, I am loving my Pepe ring reducer enlarger, especially when it comes to the spinner bands, because you just don't know if it's going to be a good fit, loose fit, too tight, so really takes the guesswork out of it. Okay, so let's get in here. I'm going to get the flux up, make it sticky, place, okay, so I've got one pallium placed in the corner. Another placed in this corner. Might not be able to see it. Okay, that one's placed. And that one's placed. All right, so now everything is in place. Yeah, you can see them perfect. Now I'm going to heat it, and if it melts, that's great. If not, I'm going to come in there with the Syndico and really give it something to think about. So I'm just heating the bezel really gently because I want them to flow down to the bezel. And I can't spin this to get to the other side, So I might have to just get my arm over top of my, there's one sort of melted, there's another melted, and all right, that looks wonderful. Let's have a look here. Okay, you can see that it's gotten quite pink, but we're going to throw that into the pickle pot with the hydrogen peroxide, 1 part, and 2 parts vinegar, and that's going to get rid of all of that pink. All right, let's go over to that pot. So here's the ring after it's come out of the vinegar and hydrogen peroxide dip, and all of the pink copper is completely dissolved. And that is a nice clean solder joint. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can either saw it out and then refine it with a ball burr, or just take a drill a hole through there, and then sometimes I'll go in with a bud burr. But today I think I might just try going in there with a saw blade and maybe just chopping out the middle. So let's do that. Okay, bring this around over here, and you probably won't get too good of a view, but basically I'm going to be doing what I said, and that is removing that central bit of metal with the solder seam. So let's see if I got this set up correctly, and let's get a little bit of lube on there. So that's the central portion. Now I'm going to just take a pair of tweezers and make sure I'm in focus. And it is out. All right, so now you can go in there with your ball burr, and I could have gone a little bit closer, but anyways, you can see the idea here. So I'm going to go in with my ball burr and then just drill out that last little bit. So the center has now been reamed out, but as you can see, it's kind of misshapen, and that's what I was saying about the gold filled is quite, it's almost like fine silver. So in my case here, the burr caught it, but don't despair, it's easily fixed. So I've got here a 4mm dapping punch, and all you have to do is, because the bezel is 4mm, you just press that in there. Like that, and you're back to being round again. And then you can also go in there with the round end and just ream it a little bit, and you're back to being round. Okay, well, let's try that one. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so that picked it up nicely. Zoom in on that. There we go. All right, so it's a good fit. So it just needs to be seated properly, and then it's ready to set. Okay, I'm going to be setting the stone now. I've got it in my GRS, and I'm going to first of all use a slightly larger, these are concave setting punches for doing tube settings. Just want to make sure my stone is still level. Yep. And then I'm going to place this directly over top, and I'm just going to rock it back and forth. And that's basically just to start to tighten up the stone. And then I'm going to go in with a slightly smaller punch, which fits fairly close to the bezel. And this one I'm going to press down a bit more firm and rock it back and forth and around, almost like you would with a regular bezel setting. But the end result is quite nice. And let me just get in there with my Optivisor and maybe a little bit more. Get some direct up and down pressure on there instead of from the side. Perfect. All right, let's pull that out and have a look at that. And then what I'll probably do is go in there with my Friedrich Dick burnisher and just give the top a little bit of a burnish as well. Okay, when it feels all nice and smooth to the touch, you're done. Okay, let's have a look here. All right, let's see what it's going to look like on the band. And then once that's flared, that's going to be quite nice. And I don't think I'll give the silver a patina on this one. I think I'll just leave it the way it is. All right, thanks for watching.